torches around the great hall of Ashwood Hollow burned low, yet the tension in the air was hotter than any flame. Ethan Cole stood at the center of the room, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the man who had just spoken words that could not be taken back. "You cannot lead this pack with a blind woman at your side," Derek Lane said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "She cannot see danger. She cannot see an enemy approaching. How can she protect this pack when she cannot even protect herself?" A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. Dozens of eyes turned toward the woman standing quietly beside Ethan. Nora Bennett did not flinch. Her chin lifted slightly, her clouded eyes calm despite the weight of every stare pressed against her skin. "She is my mate," Ethan said, his voice low but firm enough to silence the room. "That is not something for you to question, Derek. It is something for all of us to question," Derek shot back, stepping forward. "When you became Alpha, you swore to protect this pack. Every decision you make affects every person standing in this hall. And you have chosen a mate who could not spot a wolf 3 feet in front of her." Nora's hand found Ethan's arm, a silent request. He glanced at her, and something passed between them, an understanding built over months of quiet nights and whispered conversations. She gave the smallest nod. "I do not need eyes to know when danger is near," Nora said, her voice steady, carrying farther than anyone expected. "I hear things others miss. I feel things others cannot. My blindness has never once made me weak." Derek laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Feelings do not stop a beast's claws. Instinct does not build walls. This pack needs a leader's mate who can stand on the front line, not one who needs to be guided by the hand." The hall grew tense, waiting to see how Ethan would respond. He stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Nora, though she gently tugged his sleeve, silently telling him she did not need shielding. "I have watched Nora move through this hollow without a single misstep," Ethan said. "I have seen her calm a frightened child faster than any healer. I have seen her sense a storm, 3 hours before the clouds ever appeared. Do not mistake her calm for weakness, Derek. It is something else entirely, and you would do well to remember that." Derek's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more, retreating into the shadows of the hall with a look that promised the conversation was far from finished. As the crowd slowly dispersed, whispers followed Nora and Ethan out of the hall, like a cold wind that refused to let go. Nora kept her head high, her steps sure, despite the darkness that had surrounded her since birth. Only when they were alone on the path leading to their home did her shoulders finally relax. "You did not have to defend me like that," she said softly. "Yes, I did," Ethan replied. "Derek has wanted my position since the day I took it. He will use anything, including you, to shake the trust of this pack." "Let him try," Nora said, a small smile touching her lips. "He does not know what I am capable of." Ethan glanced at her, curiosity flickering behind his concern. "What do you mean?" She only shook her head, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Some things are better shown than spoken." They walked in silence for a while, the night air cool against their skin, the distant howls of wolves echoing from beyond the tree line. Ashwood Hollow was home to a pack unlike any other, a community of shifters who lived alongside the wild, ever aware of the dangers that prowled beyond their borders in the vast expanse known as the Thornwood. The Thornwood was not like ordinary forests. It was ancient, wild, and untamed, home to beasts that answered to no one, creatures born of old magic that predated even the oldest shifter bloodlines. Most avoided its depths entirely, for those who wandered too far rarely returned unharmed. Nora had grown up on the edge of that forest, raised by a mother who often disappeared for days at a time, returning with stories about creatures no one else believed existed. As a child, Nora had been teased for her blindness, mocked by other children who called her fragile, breakable, a burden to be pitied. But her mother had always told her that her blindness was not a curse. It was simply a different way of seeing the world. When Ethan had first met her, 3 winters ago, he had not cared that she could not see the color of the sky, or the shape of his face. He had cared about the way she listened, truly listened, to every word he spoke. He had cared about the calm she carried, a steadiness that seemed to settle even the most anxious hearts around her. When the bond between them had formed, undeniable and instant, he had never once doubted it. But not everyone in Ashwood Hollow shared his certainty. That night, as they settled into their home at the edge of the hollow, Nora sat by the window, though she could not see the stars scattered across the sky. She could feel the cool breeze drifting through the open shutters, carrying with it a scent she recognized instantly. "Something is out there," she murmured. Ethan looked up from where he sat, sharpening a blade out of habit more than necessity. "What do you mean?" "Something is moving through the thornwood tonight," she said. "Something restless, something angry." He set the blade down, moving to sit beside her. "Can you tell what it is?" She was quiet for a long moment, her brow furrowed in concentration, her senses stretching far beyond what any ordinary shifter could perceive. "Not yet," she finally said. "But it is coming closer to the border. I can feel it in the ground, in the air. Something old has woken up." Ethan studied her carefully. He had learned, over their time together, never to dismiss her instincts. She had sensed things before that others could not. Patterns in the wind, shifts in the earth, whispers carried on the backs of birds that flew too fast and too far from their usual paths. He did not fully understand the depth of her gift, but he trusted it completely. "I will send scouts to check the border at first light," he said. Nora nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "Something tells me first light may already be too late." The following morning, as dawn broke pale gold over Ashwood Hollow, word spread quickly through the village that livestock near the eastern fence had gone missing overnight. Not killed, not scattered, simply gone, as though something had lifted them clean from their pens without leaving a single track behind. Ethan gathered his most trusted warriors at the edge of the fence line, inspecting the scene with a growing sense of unease. Owen Hale, his closest friend and second in command, crouched near the broken fence post, running his fingers along deep gouges carved into the wood. "These are not wolf claws," Owen said, frowning. "Not bear, not any beast I recognize." "Could it be rogue shifters?" one of the younger warriors asked. Owen shook his head slowly. "No shifter I know leaves marks like this." Ethan crouched beside him, studying the gouges himself. They were deep, precise, almost deliberate in their pattern, as though whatever had made them had wanted to be noticed. A chill settled over him despite the warming morning sun. Behind them, Nora approached slowly, guided by the sound of their voices and the familiar scent of the eastern fields. She knelt near the disturbed earth, running her fingers lightly across the broken grass, feeling the lingering warmth of disturbed soil, the faint vibration still humming through the ground, like the echo of something enormous having passed through only hours before. "It is not alone," she said quietly. Every head turned toward her. "What do you mean, not alone?" Ethan asked. "There are more than one," Nora said, her fingers pressing gently against the earth, as though listening to a heartbeat buried deep beneath the soil. "I feel two, maybe three distinct presences. They move together, but they are not the same. One is larger, older, the others follow it." Owen exchanged a wary glance with Ethan. "How can she possibly know that?" "She knows," Ethan said simply, offering no further explanation, because even he did not fully understand how she perceived such things. He had learned long ago that questioning the how mattered far less than trusting the result. Word of the missing livestock spread through the hollow by midday, stirring fear among the villagers. Parents kept their children close. Warriors doubled their patrols along the border, and whispers began to circulate, quiet at first, then louder, wondering whether the increased activity in the thornwood was somehow connected to the blind mate who had sensed trouble before anyone else noticed a single sign. Derek used the fear to his advantage almost immediately. "Perhaps it is not coincidence that danger stirs the moment our alpha's mate begins speaking of feelings and instincts," he said to a small group of villagers gathered near the market square. "Perhaps she draws these creatures toward us somehow." The accusation was baseless, cruel, and utterly without proof, yet fear made people susceptible to even the most unreasonable ideas. By evening, the whispers had grown bold enough that Nora could hear them trailing behind her whenever she walked through the hollow. Hushed voices, wondering aloud if she was cursed rather than gifted. Ethan wanted to confront Derek directly, wanted to silence the rumors with the full weight of his authority, but Nora placed a gentle hand on his arm that evening, stopping him before he could storm toward Derek's home. "Let them talk," she said. "Words cannot change what is true. And soon enough, they will need someone who understands what moves in that forest. When that day comes, they will remember who was right and who was simply afraid." Ethan searched her face, searching for any trace of doubt, but found none. She was calm, unshaken, certain in a way that steadied his own racing thoughts. "You are not afraid," he said, half question, half observation. "I have been preparing for something like this my entire life," Nora replied. "My mother always told me that one day, the pack would need what I carry inside me. I did not understand what she meant until recently, but I am starting to understand now. What do you carry, Nora?" She turned her face toward him, though her clouded eyes could not meet his directly, and for the first time, a flicker of something ancient and powerful seemed to pass behind her expression. "A connection," she said softly, "to every wild thing that walks, crawls, or flies beneath the sky. It is not something I chose. It is something I was born with, passed down through blood older than this pack, older than the thornwood itself." Ethan felt a chill move through him, not of fear, but of sudden understanding, as though pieces of a puzzle he had never realized existed were slowly beginning to form a picture too large to fully grasp. That night, as the pack slept uneasily, and warriors kept restless watch along the borders, Nora slipped quietly from their home, drawn by something only she could feel, moving toward the edge of the thornwood, where shadows stretched long and deep beneath ancient, twisted trees. She did not go far. She simply stood at the border, her bare feet pressed against cool earth, her senses stretching outward into the darkness, like invisible threads reaching toward something vast and waiting. And somewhere deep within the thornwood, something vast and waiting reached back. A low sound rumbled through the trees, not quite a growl, not quite a call, but something in between, ancient and resonant, vibrating through the ground beneath her feet. Nora did not step back. She did not tremble. She simply closed her sightless eyes and listened, truly listened, to a voice that no one else in Ashwood Hollow could hear. "I know you are there," she whispered into the darkness, "and soon, everyone else will know it too." Behind her, unseen in the shadows, Ethan watched silently from a distance, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and awe, beginning to realize that the woman he loved was not merely his mate. She was something far greater than anyone in Ashwood Hollow had ever imagined. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of something wild and untamed, and far in the distance, hidden among the ancient trees of the thornwood, countless eyes opened in the darkness, watching, waiting, and for the very first time, in longer than anyone could remember, listening. 3 days passed, and the missing livestock became the least of Ashwood Hollow's worries. A patrol near the northern ridge failed to return by nightfall, and when Owen Hale led a search party at dawn, they found nothing but overturned earth, scattered weapons, and the same strange claw marks carved deep into the surrounding trees. The pack council convened immediately, gathering in the great hall with faces drawn tight with worry. Elder Margaret Doyle, the oldest and most respected member of Ashwood Hollow, sat at the head of the table, her sharp eyes moving across the room as reports were shared. 3 missing, Owen said grimly. No bodies, no blood, simply gone. Gone where? Colin Marsh asked. He was the leader of the neighboring Marsh pack, invited to Ashwood Hollow for a long-planned alliance meeting that now felt painfully out of place given the circumstances. Beside him sat his daughter, Vivian Marsh, her expression carefully composed, though her eyes lingered a bit too long on Ethan whenever he spoke. "We do not know," Ethan admitted, "but whatever moves through the thornwood is growing bolder. First livestock, now our people." Margaret leaned forward, her weathered hands folded on the table. "The thornwood has always held secrets older than any of us. There are stories, passed down for generations, of creatures that lived there long before the first shifter pack ever settled these lands. Most believe those stories were nothing more than tales meant to frighten children into staying close to home. And now?" Colin asked. "Now I am no longer certain they were only tales," Margaret said. The room fell into uneasy silence. Derek, seated near the far end of the table, finally spoke, his voice carrying its usual undertone of accusation. "Perhaps it is worth considering whether recent events might be connected to certain changes within this pack itself." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Say what you mean, Derek." "I mean," Derek said slowly, "that trouble began the moment your mate started speaking of feelings in the wind and creatures stirring in the dark. Perhaps her blindness has made her more sensitive to something the rest of us should be wary of, rather than something we should trust." "That is enough," Ethan said sharply. But Colin Marsh, ever the diplomat, raised a calming hand, before tensions could rise further. Regardless of the cause, the matter at hand requires immediate attention. My pack has faced similar troubles in the past. I propose combining our strength, strengthening the alliance between our packs, to better protect both territories. An alliance is welcome, Ethan said carefully, sensing where the conversation was headed. An alliance strengthened through marriage tends to hold far longer than one built on words alone, Colin added, glancing meaningfully toward Vivian. The room grew quiet again, this time from the weight of an unspoken suggestion hanging heavy in the air. Ethan felt his stomach tighten with irritation, though he kept his expression neutral. I already have a mate, he said firmly. The bond between myself and Nora is not something to be renegotiated for the sake of political convenience. Vivian spoke for the first time, her voice smooth and practiced. No one is suggesting you abandon your mate, Ethan, but traditions exist for a reason. A second bond, formed for the strength and protection of both our packs, would not be unprecedented. It would not be welcomed either, Ethan replied, his tone leaving no room for further discussion. Derek, sensing an opportunity, leaned forward. Perhaps it is worth considering, given the current circumstances. A leader's mate who cannot fight, who cannot see approaching danger, offers little in terms of protection during times like these. A stronger bond, with someone capable of standing beside you on the front line, might serve this pack far better. Ethan rose from his seat, his patience finally reaching its limit. Nora offers more protection to this pack than you understand, Derek. And I will not stand here and listen to my mate be dismissed as though she is nothing more than a burden to be replaced. The meeting ended shortly after, tensions unresolved, the alliance discussion left hanging uncomfortably in the air. As the council dispersed, Margaret lingered behind, catching Ethan's arm gently before he could leave. "Walk with me," she said. They stepped outside into the cool afternoon air, moving away from the great hall toward the quiet path that wound along the edge of the hollow. "You defended her well," Margaret said. "She deserves far more than defense," Ethan replied. "She deserves to be believed." Margaret nodded slowly. "I have lived a long life, Ethan, longer than most in this pack. And I have heard stories about bloodlines connected to the old magic of the Thornwood, families capable of sensing and communicating with creatures the rest of us cannot even perceive. Such gifts are rare, almost mythical at this point. Most believed that bloodline had disappeared generations ago." Ethan stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "You believe Nora carries that bloodline?" "I believe," Margaret said carefully, "that whatever grows restless in the Thornwood may be connected to something far older and far more significant than any of us currently understand. And I believe Nora may hold answers none of the rest of us possess." That evening, Ethan returned home to find Nora sitting quietly in their garden, her fingers gently tracing the petals of a flower. She could not see, but could feel completely through touch alone. He settled beside her, recounting the council meeting in careful detail, watching her expression shift as he spoke of Colin's proposal and Derek's continued accusations. "They wish to replace me," Nora said quietly, though there was no anger in her voice, only a calm sort of understanding. "I would never allow that," Ethan said firmly. "I know," she replied, resting her hand over his, "but it does not surprise me. Fear makes people search for easy answers, even when those answers are wrong." "Margaret believes you carry an old bloodline," Ethan said, "one connected to the Thornwood itself." Nora was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "My mother spoke of this before she passed. She said our family once lived among the ancient forest itself, generations ago, before shifter packs ever settled these lands. She said our blood carried a connection to every wild creature that walked beneath those trees, a bond forged long before memory itself. Why did she never tell the pack? Because gifts like this are often misunderstood, Nora said, feared rather than embraced. She wanted me to live a normal life, free from the burden of expectations tied to something so old and so powerful. But now, Nora said softly, I think the time for hiding has passed. That night, the restlessness in the Thornwood grew stronger. Villagers reported strange sounds carrying across the border, deep guttural calls unlike anything heard before, echoing through the darkness in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost communicative. Nora sat awake long after Ethan had fallen into restless sleep beside her, her senses stretched toward the forest, listening to the calls carried on the wind. She could feel them clearly now, Three distinct presences moving through the trees, growing bolder with each passing night, testing the boundaries of Ashwood Hollow, as though searching for something, or someone. She rose quietly, and moved to the window, resting her hand against the cool wooden frame. The calls grew louder, closer, until she could feel the vibration of them deep within her chest. "I hear you," she whispered into the darkness. "I have always heard you." The calls paused, as though something on the other side of that vast distance had heard her whispered words and understood them completely. And for a brief moment, silence settled over the thornwood, heavy and expectant, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Then, slowly, the calls resumed, softer now, almost curious, no longer testing the boundaries of the hollow, but reaching toward the one person capable of finally answering them. Nora smiled faintly into the darkness, her sightless eyes reflecting a strange, quiet confidence. "Soon," she murmured. "Soon, they will understand exactly what I am." Behind her, unseen in the shadows of their small home, Ethan stirred restlessly in his sleep, dreaming of ancient trees and glowing eyes, hidden deep within an endless, watching forest, unaware that his mate stood only steps away, already beginning to answer a call that would change everything Ashwood Hollow believed to be true. The following morning brought new reports of disturbed earth along the eastern border, closer to the village than ever before. Fear spread rapidly through the hollow, whispered conversations growing louder, more desperate, as villagers began questioning whether their home remained safe at all. Derek used the growing panic to further his own agenda, quietly gathering support among frightened villagers, subtly suggesting that a stronger, more traditional leadership might better protect the pack during such uncertain times. Vivian Marsh, meanwhile, remained close to Ethan whenever possible, her presence a constant, quiet reminder of the alliance her father continued to push. Nora noticed the shifting tension around her, the whispered conversations that fell silent whenever she approached, the wary glances following her through the market square. Yet she remained calm, her confidence unshaken, carrying the quiet certainty of someone who understood a truth the rest of the pack had not yet discovered. That certainty would soon be tested in ways no one in Ashwood Hollow could have predicted. A young girl named Ivy Turner had always been afraid of the world, beyond the safety of her family's cottage, at the edge of Ashwood Hollow. She was only 7 years old, small for her age, with a nervous habit of hiding behind her mother's skirts whenever strangers approached. But of everyone in the hollow, Ivy had never once feared Nora. "You are not scared of me," Nora had said to her once, months earlier, during a quiet afternoon, when Ivy had wandered close while Nora sat weaving baskets near the market square. "Why would I be scared of you?" Ivy had asked, genuinely puzzled. "You are kind." That simple exchange had formed an unlikely friendship between them, one that continued quietly through the following months, Ivy often finding excuses to sit beside Nora, chattering about her day, while Nora listened patiently, offering gentle guidance whenever the young girl needed it. It was Ivy who witnessed, quite by accident, the first undeniable proof of Nora's extraordinary gift. One afternoon, while playing near the edge of the northern fields, Ivy discovered a small, injured hawk tangled in a thicket of thorns, its wing bent at an unnatural angle, its sharp eyes wide with pain and fear. The bird thrashed weakly as Ivy approached, snapping its beak in warning, clearly too frightened and too injured to allow anyone close. Frightened for the creature, but unsure what to do, Ivy ran as quickly as she could toward Nora's home, tears streaming down her face as she recounted what she had found. "Please," Ivy begged, tugging at Nora's sleeve. "You have to help it. No one else can get close enough." Nora rose immediately, allowing Ivy to guide her toward the northern fields, moving carefully, but swiftly, despite her blindness. When they arrived, the hawk was exactly where Ivy had described, thrashing weakly against the thorns, its sharp cries echoing across the empty field. "Stay back," Nora instructed gently, kneeling a short distance away from the injured bird. Ivy watched, wide-eyed, as Nora closed her sightless eyes, her expression growing calm and focused, her lips moving in a soft, almost musical murmur that Ivy could not quite understand. The words were not quite human, carrying a strange rhythm that seemed to vibrate through the air itself. The hawk's frantic struggling slowed almost immediately, its sharp cries softening into quiet, uncertain chirps. Slowly, cautiously, it turned its head toward Nora, its wild eyes locking onto her face, despite the fact that she could not see it in return. "It is all right," Nora whispered softly, extending her hand slowly, palm open, unthreatening. "I am not here to hurt you. I only wish to help." To Ivy's astonishment, the hawk stopped struggling entirely, allowing Nora to approach without a single sign of fear. Nora gently freed the bird from the thorns, her fingers moving with careful precision despite her inability to see the tangled branches, guided instead by some other sense entirely. Once free, the hawk remained still in Nora's hands, its injured wing resting carefully against her palm. Nora ran her fingers gently along the injury, murmuring softly the entire time. And slowly, impossibly, the bird's frightened posture relaxed completely, trusting her without hesitation. "How did you do that?" Ivy whispered, awestruck. Nora smiled softly. "I simply listened to what it needed, and I let it know it was safe." "But it let you touch it. It never lets anyone touch it. I have seen the other children try to help injured animals before, and they always run away scared." "Animals sense fear and kindness far more clearly than humans do," Nora explained. "They do not judge based on appearance. They judge based on intention. This little one could feel that my intentions were only to help." Ivy watched with wide, curious eyes as Nora carefully splinted the hawk's wing, using a small strip of cloth torn from her own sleeve, her movements confident and precise despite her blindness. Throughout the entire process, the hawk remained calm, occasionally letting out soft, trusting chirps. "Will you keep him?" Ivy asked. "No," Nora said gently. "He belongs to the sky, not to a cage. Once his wing heals, he will return to where he belongs." She gently placed the hawk into a small nest fashioned from soft grass near the base of a nearby tree, murmuring softly once more before rising to her feet. The hawk settled quietly, watching her with an expression that seemed almost grateful. "Can you promise not to tell anyone what you saw today?" Nora asked Ivy gently, once they began walking back toward the hollow. "Why?" Ivy asked, confused. "Because some people would not understand," Nora said carefully, "and I am not ready for the entire pack to understand just yet." Ivy nodded solemnly, though the question lingered in her young mind for the rest of the day. She kept her promise faithfully, though the memory of what she had witnessed stayed vivid and unforgettable, a secret shared between herself and the woman everyone else in the hollow so wrongly underestimated. Over the following days, Ivy returned often to check on the hawk, watching as its wings slowly healed under Nora's careful guidance. She noticed other small things as well, subtle signs she had never paid attention to before. Songbirds seemed to gather near Nora's garden more frequently than anywhere else in the hollow. Rabbits, normally skittish and quick to flee, would linger calmly near the edges of Nora's property, seemingly unafraid despite her presence. "Do all animals like you?" Ivy asked one afternoon, watching a small rabbit hop calmly across the garden path, only steps away from where Nora sat weaving another basket. "Not exactly like me," Nora replied thoughtfully. "It is more that they trust me. They can sense that I understand them, in a way most others cannot." "Even the scary things in the thornwood?" Nora's expression grew momentarily distant, thoughtful. "Even those," she said quietly. "Perhaps especially those." Meanwhile, tension within Ashwood Hollow continued to grow. Reports of strange sounds and disturbed earth near the border increased with each passing day, and fear settled deeply into the hearts of the villagers. Warriors patrolled constantly, exhausted and on edge, while Derek continued quietly building support among those frightened enough to question Ethan's leadership. Ethan, meanwhile, grew increasingly protective of Nora, aware of the mounting whispers surrounding her, yet uncertain exactly how to address concerns he did not fully understand himself. He noticed subtle changes in her as well, a growing confidence, a quiet calmness that seemed to deepen with each passing day, as though she were preparing herself for something significant. "You seem different lately," he mentioned one evening, watching her carefully as she sat by their window, her expression peaceful, despite the mounting tension surrounding them. "I am simply remembering who I truly am," Nora replied. "For a long time, I allowed others to define me through their fear of my blindness, but that fear was never the truth. It was simply their limited understanding." "And the truth?" Ethan asked gently. "The truth," Nora said, turning her face toward him, "is that I was never broken, never fragile, never weak. I was simply waiting for the right moment to reveal who I truly am. Ethan reached for her hand, holding it gently. I have always believed in you, Nora, long before I understood any of this. I know, she said softly, and that belief means more to me than you will ever fully understand. That night, as Ethan slept peacefully beside her, Nora once again rose quietly, drawn toward the edge of their property, where the small hawk continued to recover within its makeshift nest. She knelt beside it gently, running her fingers softly across its healing wing. Soon you will fly again, she whispered. And when you do, I hope you will remember that not everyone who cannot see clearly is blind to the truth. The hawk chirped softly in response, nuzzling gently against her hand, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Nora felt a quiet, unshakable certainty settle deep within her chest. Whatever waited for her within the depths of the thornwood, whatever ancient bond stirred restlessly beneath her skin, she was ready to finally embrace it completely, no matter what the rest of Ashwood Hollow believed about her. The time for hiding was over. The time for revealing her true strength was rapidly approaching, closer than anyone, aside from a small, wide-eyed girl and a healing hawk, could possibly imagine. The alarm bell rang out across Ashwood Hollow just before dawn, its urgent, clanging tone tearing through the quiet morning air and jolting every household awake at once. Ethan was on his feet and out the door within seconds, Nora close behind him, her senses already stretching outward toward the source of the growing chaos. Warriors rushed toward the eastern border, weapons drawn, faces tight with fear and determination. Ethan sprinted alongside Owen Hale, both men moving with practiced speed honed through years of training, yet nothing could have fully prepared them for what awaited at the fence line. 3 massive creatures had broken through the eastern border, unlike anything the pack had encountered before. They resembled wolves in shape, yet were far larger, their fur a strange, shadowy gray that seemed to absorb the early morning light rather than reflect it. Their eyes glowed faintly, an unnatural amber color that seemed to pulse with restless energy. "Hold the line," Ethan shouted, his voice carrying authority despite the fear tightening his chest. Warriors formed a defensive perimeter, weapons raised, but the creatures moved with unnatural speed, weaving between attacks with ease that left even the most skilled fighters struggling to land a single blow. One warrior, a strong young man named Peter Grant, lunged forward with his blade, only to be thrown backward with startling force, landing hard against the earth, his weapon skittering uselessly away. "They are too fast," Owen shouted, barely deflecting a swipe aimed toward his side. "Nothing we do is slowing them down." Ethan gritted his teeth, watching helplessly as warrior after warrior failed to land any significant damage against the creatures. They moved with an intelligence that seemed almost deliberate, testing the defenses of the pack, rather than attacking with pure, mindless aggression. Derek arrived moments later, rallying additional warriors, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine alarm as he witnessed the creatures effortlessly evading every coordinated attack thrown against them. "We need more warriors," Derek shouted, though even as more fighters joined the defense, the results remained the same. The creatures continued moving with impossible speed and precision, avoiding fatal blows while occasionally lashing out with enough force to send even the strongest warriors tumbling backward. Panic began spreading through the gathered crowd as villagers watched from a safe distance, horrified by the display of strength their strongest warriors seemed powerless against. Children cried, clutching tightly to their parents, while elders murmured fearfully among themselves, wondering if Ashwood Hollow's defenses would hold at all. Nora stood at the edge of the chaos, her senses fully extended, feeling every movement of the creatures with startling clarity, despite her inability to see them directly. She could feel their restless energy, their confusion, their fear, disguised as aggression, a deep, ancient distress that seemed to radiate from somewhere far beyond simple animal instinct. "They are frightened," she murmured to herself, though no one nearby heard her over the chaos surrounding them. Ethan, meanwhile, continued directing his warriors, desperately searching for any weakness in the creature's movements, any opening that might allow his fighters to gain the upper hand. But the creatures seemed almost impossibly coordinated, moving as though guided by a single shared consciousness rather than 3 separate independent minds. "Fall back!" Ethan finally shouted, watching in horror as another warrior narrowly avoided a devastating blow. "Regroup at the second line." The warriors retreated cautiously, forming a tighter defensive formation near the edge of the village itself, buying precious time while the creatures paused at the broken fence line, their glowing eyes scanning the retreating fighters with unsettling intelligence. Margaret Doyle arrived breathlessly at Ethan's side, her weathered face pale with concern. "This is exactly what the old stories warned about," she said. "Creatures of the Thornwood, awakened after generations of dormancy. I fear our usual methods of defense will not be enough." "Then what do you suggest?" Ethan demanded, frustration and fear coloring his voice. Margaret hesitated, her eyes drifting toward Nora, who stood quietly near the edge of the chaos, her expression calm despite the surrounding panic. "Perhaps," Margaret said carefully. "The answer is closer than you realize." Ethan followed her gaze, his heart tightening as understanding began to dawn. "No," he said immediately. "It is too dangerous." "Ethan," Nora said softly, stepping forward despite his protest. "I can feel their fear, their confusion. They are not simply mindless beasts, attacking without reason." "They just injured a dozen of our strongest warriors," Ethan said, his voice tight with fear for her safety. "I will not risk you approaching them." "You may not have a choice," Nora replied gently. "Nothing else has worked so far." Derek, overhearing the exchange, stepped forward with visible disbelief. "You cannot possibly be suggesting she approach those creatures. She cannot even see them." "I do not need to see them," Nora said calmly. "I can feel them far more clearly than any of you." "This is madness," Derek said, turning toward Ethan. "You would risk your mate's life based on feelings and instincts against creatures that have already overwhelmed our strongest fighters?" Ethan's jaw tightened, torn between his fear for Nora's safety and the growing realization that nothing else seemed capable of stopping the creatures currently threatening his entire pack. He turned toward Nora, searching her calm expression for any trace of doubt, but found none. "Are you certain?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have never been more certain of anything," Nora replied. The creatures, growing restless at the pause in confrontation, began moving forward once again, their glowing eyes scanning the retreating warriors with renewed aggression. Panic rippled through the gathered crowd as the beasts advanced steadily toward the second defensive line. Ethan took a deep breath, torn between every instinct screaming at him to protect his mate and the quiet, unwavering trust he had built with her over years of partnership. Finally, he made his decision. "Everyone, stand down," he commanded, his voice carrying clearly, despite the chaos surrounding them. Gasps of disbelief rippled through the warriors and villagers alike. Derek stepped forward immediately, outrage clear across his face. "You cannot be serious. You would abandon your defenses entirely?" "I trust her," Ethan said simply, his eyes fixed on Nora as she began walking calmly toward the advancing creatures, her steps sure and confident despite the danger awaiting her. The crowd fell into stunned silence, watching in disbelief as the blind woman they had so often dismissed as fragile and weak walked directly toward three massive, unpredictable creatures that had just overwhelmed their most skilled warriors without effort. Nora's heart pounded steadily, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment finally arriving, a moment she somehow felt she had been preparing for her entire life. She stretched her senses fully toward the creatures, feeling their restless energy grow stronger with each step she took closer. The largest of the three creatures paused, its glowing eyes fixing directly upon her, despite the fact that she could not see it in return. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through its chest, though it did not immediately advance. Behind her, Ethan watched with his heart lodged firmly in his throat, every instinct within him screaming to intervene, yet somehow finding the strength to remain still, trusting the woman he loved more than he had ever trusted anyone else in his entire life. Nora stopped a short distance from the creatures, close enough now to feel the heat radiating from their massive forms, close enough to hear the low, rumbling growls vibrating deep within their chests. She closed her sightless eyes, steadying her breathing, and reached out with senses far beyond what any ordinary shifter possessed. The entire village held its breath, watching in tense silence, as the blind woman stood fearlessly before creatures capable of overwhelming their strongest defenses, waiting to see whether her quiet confidence would prove to be wisdom or a fatal, tragic mistake. The silence, stretching across Ashwood Hollow, felt endless, every villager holding their breath as Nora stood mere steps away from the three massive creatures, their glowing amber eyes fixed intently upon her. The largest of the beasts lowered its head slightly, its low growl rumbling steadily through the tense morning air, though it made no move to attack. "Nora," Ethan called softly, unable to fully contain his fear, despite his earlier decision to trust her completely. "Please, be careful." She did not turn toward his voice, her focus entirely fixed upon the creatures before her, her senses stretched fully outward, feeling every subtle shift in their restless energy. She could sense their confusion clearly now, layered beneath aggression that felt more like fear than genuine hostility. "You are not here to hurt anyone," she said softly, her voice carrying a strange, gentle authority despite its quiet volume. "You are simply lost, confused. Something has disturbed your home, and you do not understand why." The largest creature's growl faltered slightly, its glowing eyes narrowing, as though genuinely surprised by her words. Behind her, Derek scoffed audibly, though he remained frozen in place, unwilling to risk drawing the creature's attention away from Nora. "She is talking to them as though they can understand her," he muttered under his breath. "Perhaps they can," Margaret replied quietly, her sharp eyes fixed intently on the unfolding scene. Nora took another careful step forward, extending her hand slowly, palm open, exactly as she had done days earlier with the injured hawk. The creature's growl deepened momentarily, its massive form tensing, ready to strike, yet something held it back, some invisible force compelling it to pause rather than attack. "I know you feel it too," Nora continued softly. "The disturbance beneath the earth. The awakening of something that should have remained dormant. You did not choose this restlessness. It was forced upon you." The creature's ears flattened slightly, its glowing eyes flickering with something that resembled recognition rather than aggression. Slowly, cautiously, it lowered its massive head toward her outstretched hand, sniffing carefully, its warm breath ghosting across her fingers. Gasps rippled through the crowd, disbelief and astonishment mingling as they watched the impossible unfold before their eyes. The creature that had overwhelmed their strongest warriors without effort now stood calmly before their blind, supposedly fragile alpha's mate, allowing her to touch it without any sign of aggression whatsoever. "This cannot be real," Derek whispered, his earlier confidence replaced entirely by stunned disbelief. Nora gently rested her palm against the creature's massive snout, feeling its warm breath steady beneath her touch, its restless energy slowly calming, settling into something far more peaceful than the chaotic aggression it had displayed only moments earlier. "There now," she murmured softly. "You are safe. No one here wishes to harm you." The second creature, initially hesitant, slowly approached as well, its glowing eyes fixed curiously upon her, its earlier aggression fading into cautious curiosity. Nora extended her other hand, allowing it to approach freely, sensing its restless energy calming just as steadily as the first. The third creature remained slightly more hesitant, pacing anxiously a short distance away, its growl still rumbling deep within its chest. Nora turned her attention toward it, her expression calm and patient, despite its continued aggression. "You are frightened," she said gently. "More than the others. Something happened to you specifically, didn't it?" The creature's pacing slowed, its glowing eyes fixed intently upon her despite her inability to see it in return. Slowly, cautiously, it approached, its massive form trembling slightly, its earlier aggression replaced by something that resembled genuine distress. Nora knelt slowly, lowering herself to a less imposing height, extending both hands gently toward the approaching creature. It hesitated only a moment longer, before finally closing the distance completely, resting its massive head against her outstretched palms, a low, mournful sound escaping its throat. "I understand," Nora whispered softly, running her fingers gently along its fur. "You did not want this. None of you did." The crowd watched in absolute silence, stunned beyond words, as the woman they had so often dismissed as weak and fragile calmed three massive, seemingly unstoppable creatures with nothing more than gentle words and a steady, unwavering presence. Ethan felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, overwhelmed by pride and relief in equal measure, watching Nora accomplish something that had seemed utterly impossible only moments earlier. "How is this possible?" Owen Hale whispered, standing beside Ethan, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. "She told me once that she carries a connection to every wild creature beneath the sky," Ethan murmured softly. "I did not fully understand what she meant until this very moment." Slowly, cautiously, Nora rose to her feet, the three massive creatures remaining calmly beside her, their earlier aggression completely replaced by quiet, trusting stillness. She turned toward the gathered crowd, her sightless eyes reflecting quiet confidence despite the weight of every stunned stare pressed against her. "They were never truly dangerous," she said clearly, her voice carrying easily across the silent crowd. "They were frightened, confused, driven from their home by something disturbing the depths of the Thornwood. Their aggression was simply fear, disguised as strength, much like many things people misunderstand." Her words carried a subtle weight beyond their immediate meaning, and several villagers exchanged uncomfortable glances, recognizing the quiet parallel she had drawn between the creature's misunderstood behavior and the assumptions so often made about her own perceived weakness. Derek remained silent, his earlier accusations feeling suddenly hollow and foolish in the face of what he had just witnessed. Even Vivian Marsh, standing near her father, watched with visible astonishment, her earlier confidence in her own value to Ethan's leadership shaken by the undeniable display of power Nora had just demonstrated. "What disturbs the Thornwood?" Ethan asked, gently, approaching Nora carefully, mindful of the calm creatures resting peacefully beside her. "I do not yet know completely," Nora admitted, "but I intend to find out. And I believe these three may be able to help guide us toward answers, if we allow them to trust us completely." Margaret stepped forward slowly, her expression filled with a mixture of awe and quiet vindication. "The old stories were true after all," she murmured. "The bloodline of the Beast Whisperers has not disappeared. It has simply been waiting, hidden, for the right moment to reveal itself." Nora turned toward the elder's voice, offering a small, humble smile. "I did not choose this gift for recognition, Margaret. I only wish to protect this pack, exactly as I have always wanted to, despite what others believed me capable of." The crowd remained silent for a long moment, processing the impossible scene they had just witnessed, before Ethan finally stepped forward, closing the remaining distance between himself and Nora, taking her hand gently in his own. "You just changed everything," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I only revealed what was always true," Nora replied gently. "I was never weak, Ethan. I was simply waiting for the right moment to show everyone exactly what I am capable of." As the three massive creatures settled calmly at the edge of the hollow, their earlier aggression completely forgotten, the entire pack began to understand, for the first time, that the woman so many had dismissed and underestimated held power far greater than any of them could have possibly imagined. But even as celebration and disbelief rippled through the crowd, Nora's expression remained thoughtful, her senses still stretched toward the distant depths of the Thornwood, aware that whatever had disturbed these creatures enough to drive them from their home remained unresolved, growing restless, and far from finished. In the days following the confrontation at the eastern border, Ashwood Hollow transformed into a place buzzing with disbelief, admiration, and quiet reconsideration. The three massive creatures, once feared as unstoppable threats, now rested peacefully near the edge of the village, calmly accepting food and water, offered cautiously by curious villagers who had watched Nora's remarkable display firsthand. Word of what happened spread quickly beyond Ashwood Hollow itself, carried by traveling merchants and messengers toward neighboring packs, including Colin Marsh's own territory. Within days, visitors began arriving specifically to witness the woman capable of calming creatures that had overwhelmed an entire pack's strongest warriors. Nora, however, remained focused on more pressing matters. Despite the celebration surrounding her newfound recognition, she spent hours each day sitting quietly beside the calmed creatures, communicating with them through methods only she seemed to fully understand, gathering information about the disturbance still growing within the depths of the Thornwood. "They call it the waking," she explained to Ethan one evening, as they sat together near the resting creatures. "Something ancient has stirred beneath the forest floor, disturbing every creature connected to that land. They do not fully understand what caused it, but they describe a deep, restless energy spreading outward, growing stronger with each passing day." "Do you know what could cause something like that?" Ethan asked. Nora shook her head slowly. "Not yet. But Margaret believes the old stories may hold answers. She has been searching through ancient records, hoping to find something relevant." Their conversation was interrupted by Margaret herself, approaching with a weathered scroll clutched carefully in her hands, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. I believe I have found something, Margaret said, settling beside them. These records speak of a bloodstone buried deep within the heart of the Thornwood, an ancient artifact said to regulate the balance between wild creatures and the surrounding land. According to legend, if the bloodstone were ever disturbed or removed, it would cause exactly the kind of restless disturbance we are currently witnessing. Disturbed by what? Ethan asked. Margaret's expression grew grave. The records do not specify, but they warn that such disturbances often occur through deliberate interference, rather than natural causes. Nora's expression grew thoughtful, her senses briefly extending toward the calmed creatures resting nearby. They mentioned something similar, she said quietly. A presence within the forest, unfamiliar and deliberate, moving toward the heart of the Thornwood in recent weeks. Someone is deliberately disturbing this bloodstone? Ethan asked, alarm coloring his voice. It would appear so, Margaret confirmed. The implications settled heavily over the small group. If someone was intentionally interfering with the ancient balance of the Thornwood, the recent disturbances were merely the beginning of a much larger, more dangerous threat. We need to investigate further, Ethan said firmly. If this bloodstone continues to be disturbed, the situation will only grow worse.
I agree,
Nora said, and I believe our new companions may be able to guide us. She gestured gently toward the three creatures resting peacefully nearby, their glowing eyes now calm and trusting rather than aggressive. Over the following days, Nora continued communicating with them, slowly gathering more information about the source of the disturbance troubling their ancient home. Meanwhile, within the pack itself, opinions regarding Nora began shifting dramatically. Villagers who had once whispered doubts about her capabilities now approached her with newfound respect, occasionally bringing injured animals for her assistance, curious to witness her remarkable gift firsthand. Even Derek, though clearly reluctant to fully abandon his earlier position, found himself unable to publicly dismiss what he had personally witnessed. He remained quiet during subsequent council meetings, his usual confident accusations noticeably absent, though his expression continued to reflect discomfort whenever Nora's name arose in conversation. Vivian Marsh, surprisingly, approached Nora directly one afternoon, finding her seated quietly near the resting creatures. I owe you an apology, Vivian said, her tone carefully measured. I underestimated you significantly. Nora turned toward her voice, her expression calm and without resentment. Apology accepted, though none was necessary. Doubt is a natural response to something unfamiliar. Still, Vivian continued, I recognize now that Ethan's bond with you was never a weakness to be exploited. I apologize for my father's suggestions regarding an alternative alliance. Your father simply wished to protect his pack, Nora replied gently. There is no fault in that, even if his methods proved unnecessary. Vivian studied her for a long moment, genuine curiosity, replacing her earlier skepticism. How does it feel, she asked carefully, to sense the world the way you do? Nora considered the question thoughtfully. It is difficult to explain to someone who has never experienced it. I do not see shapes or colors, but I feel energy, emotion, intention. Every living creature carries a distinct presence, and once you learn to recognize those presences clearly, an entire world opens before you, richer in many ways than sight alone could ever offer. Vivian nodded slowly, genuine respect settling into her expression. I believe I understand now why Ethan chose you as his mate. As their conversation ended, Nora returned her attention toward the resting creatures, continuing her careful efforts to understand the growing disturbance within the Thornwood. Each day brought new fragments of information, pieced together slowly through patient communication and careful listening. Finally, nearly 2 weeks after the initial confrontation, Nora approached Ethan with an expression of quiet urgency. I believe I understand what is happening, she said. The bloodstone has not simply been disturbed. It has been removed entirely from its resting place, carried deeper into the forest by someone seeking to harness its power for themselves. Who would do such a thing? Ethan asked, alarm clear in his voice. I do not yet know, Nora admitted, but whoever they are, their interference is causing widespread disruption throughout the entire forest, driving countless creatures into confusion and aggression. If the bloodstone is not returned soon, the disturbance will continue growing, potentially threatening far more than just our border. Ethan's expression grew resolute. Then we need to find whoever is responsible and return the bloodstone before the situation worsens further. It will not be easy, Nora warned. Whoever holds the Bloodstone now likely understands its power, and may use it deliberately to cause further chaos. Regardless of the difficulty, Ethan said firmly, we cannot allow this situation to continue unchecked. Nora nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. I believe I can help locate the Bloodstone's exact location, using my connection to the surrounding wildlife, but retrieving it safely will require careful planning and likely significant risk. Whatever risk is required, Ethan said, I trust you completely to guide us through it. As their conversation concluded, neither of them fully realized just how significant that risk would soon become, nor how deeply the person responsible for disturbing the ancient Bloodstone would test not only Nora's remarkable gift, but the very safety and future of Ashwood Hollow itself. That night, as Nora sat quietly beside the calmed creatures, continuing her patient efforts to understand the depths of the disturbance troubling the Thornwood, she felt something new stir within the forest's restless energy, something deliberate, calculating, and unmistakably aware of her growing influence over the wild creatures surrounding Ashwood Hollow. Whoever held the ancient Bloodstone, it seemed, had begun to notice her as well. News of Nora's remarkable gift continued spreading far beyond Ashwood Hollow, reaching packs scattered throughout the region within only a matter of weeks. While most reacted with genuine admiration, curious to learn more about the woman capable of calming creatures no ordinary shifter could approach, others reacted with suspicion, uncertain what to make of a gift so rare it had not been witnessed in generations. Rumors began circulating, distorted and exaggerated through repeated retelling, some claiming Nora possessed dark magic capable of controlling minds, rather than simply communicating with them. Others suggested her blindness itself was somehow connected to forbidden practices, an unnatural price paid in exchange for her extraordinary abilities. Derek, though outwardly maintaining silence following his earlier humiliation, found himself unable to fully release his resentment toward Nora's growing influence. Quietly, subtly, he began encouraging these darker rumors, among certain members of the pack still uncertain about her intentions, careful never to directly accuse her himself, yet allowing doubt to spread through whispered suggestion and pointed questions. Is it not strange, Derek mentioned casually to a small group of warriors one evening, that such a rare gift would suddenly appear now, precisely when the pack faces unprecedented danger? Perhaps her arrival, and the disturbance within the Thornwood, are more connected than we realize. The seed of doubt, though baseless, found fertile ground among those already uneasy about the unfamiliar nature of Nora's abilities. Within days, hushed conversations began circulating throughout Ashwood Hollow, questioning whether Nora's gift might somehow be connected to the very disturbance threatening their home, rather than a solution to it. Nora, aware of the growing suspicion, despite her calm exterior, addressed the concerns directly during a gathering called by Margaret Doyle, hoping to settle the community's uncertainty once and for all. I understand your fear, Nora said, standing calmly before the gathered crowd, her sightless eyes reflecting quiet confidence, despite the weight of the moment. Unfamiliar things often inspire suspicion rather than trust. But I assure each of you, my gift exists solely to protect this pack, not to threaten it. How can we be certain? A voice called from within the crowd. Perhaps you have been secretly working with whoever disturbed the ancient Bloodstone. Murmurs rippled through the gathered villagers, uncertainty and fear evident on many faces. Ethan stepped forward immediately, ready to defend Nora once again, but she gently placed a hand on his arm, silently requesting he allow her to address the accusation herself. I have spent every waking moment since discovering the disturbance, attempting to understand its cause and find a solution, Nora said calmly. If I intended harm toward this pack, I would not have calmed the very creatures capable of destroying it. I would not have spent countless hours gathering information meant solely to protect Ashwood Hollow. Perhaps your calming of those creatures was simply part of a larger deception, Derek suggested from within the crowd, his tone carefully measured, avoiding direct accusation while still planting doubt. Nora turned toward his voice, her expression unreadable. If you believe that, Derek, then perhaps you should ask yourself honestly, what evidence supports such a claim, beyond your own continued discomfort with a gift you do not fully understand? The crowd fell silent, several villagers exchanging uncertain glances, recognizing the validity of Nora's response, despite their lingering unease. Margaret stepped forward then, her weathered voice carrying authority earned through decades of wisdom and leadership. "I have researched the old records extensively," Margaret said. "The bloodline Nora carries is documented clearly within our history, a rare gift passed down through generations, always intended to protect rather than harm. Suspicion without evidence serves only to weaken this pack during a time when unity is needed most." Her words carried weight, settling much of the crowd's uncertainty, though Nora could still sense lingering doubt among certain individuals, doubt she suspected Derek had deliberately cultivated behind the scenes. Later that evening, alone with Ethan, Nora finally allowed her calm composure to waver slightly, exhaustion and frustration bleeding through her usual steady demeanor. "I do not understand why some refuse to trust me, even after everything I have done to help this pack," she admitted quietly. Ethan gently pulled her into a comforting embrace. "Fear often blinds people to reason, Nora. Ironic, considering how clearly you see the truth despite lacking physical sight." She allowed herself a small, tired smile. "Perhaps that irony is exactly the lesson this pack needs to learn." "Give them time," Ethan said gently. "Trust is often earned gradually, especially when facing something as unfamiliar as your remarkable gift. You have already proven your strength and loyalty beyond doubt. The rest will follow eventually." Despite Ethan's reassurance, Nora remained deeply focused on locating the missing bloodstone, aware that resolving the disturbance within the Thornwood would ultimately silence any remaining doubts far more effectively than words alone ever could. Over the following days, she continued communicating patiently with the three calmed creatures, gradually piecing together fragments of information regarding the bloodstone's location. The creatures described a hidden clearing deep within the Thornwood, guarded carefully by whoever had removed the ancient artifact from its rightful resting place. They described someone unfamiliar, Nora explained to Ethan and Owen one evening, gathered together to discuss their next course of action. Not a shifter from any recognized pack, nor a creature native to the Thornwood itself. Something else entirely, deliberate and calculating in their actions. "A rogue sorcerer, perhaps," Owen suggested. "Someone seeking to harness the Bloodstone's power for personal gain?" "It is possible," Nora agreed. "Whoever they are, they understand exactly what they have taken, and they appear prepared to defend it fiercely." Ethan's expression grew resolute. "Then we must be equally prepared when we confront them." "I will need to accompany whoever attempts to retrieve the Bloodstone," Nora said firmly. "My connection to the surrounding creatures may prove essential in navigating the depths of the Thornwood safely, and in convincing them to assist us against whoever currently holds the artifact." Ethan hesitated, clearly torn between his trust in her abilities and his instinctive desire to protect her from further danger. Finally, he nodded slowly. "We will plan carefully," he said, "and we will ensure you remain as protected as possible throughout the entire process." As their planning continued late into the night, none of them fully realized just how deliberately and carefully their unknown adversary had already begun preparing a far greater challenge, one specifically designed to test Nora's remarkable gift against creatures and dangers, far beyond anything Ashwood Hollow had faced thus far. The true test of her strength, it seemed, still waited patiently within the shadowed depths of the ancient Thornwood. The expedition into the Thornwood began at first light, a carefully chosen group consisting of Ethan, Nora, Owen Hale, and a handful of trusted warriors, moving cautiously beyond the familiar borders of Ashwood Hollow for the first time in generations. The three calmed creatures accompanied them as well, walking protectively alongside Nora, their glowing eyes scanning the surrounding forest with quiet vigilance. The Thornwood felt different from within its depths than it appeared from the safety of the hollow's borders. Ancient trees stretched impossibly high overhead, their twisted branches forming a dense canopy that filtered sunlight into strange, shifting patterns across the forest floor. The air itself felt heavier here, charged with an energy that made even the most experienced warriors uneasy. "Stay close," Ethan instructed quietly, his hand resting protectively near Nora's shoulder as they moved carefully along a narrow path, guided by the creature's familiarity with the terrain. Nora's senses stretched fully outward as they progressed deeper into the forest, feeling the restless energy Margaret had described growing steadily stronger with each step. Countless creatures watched from the shadows, their presence felt clearly through Nora's extraordinary connection. Though none approached openly, their fear and confusion palpable even to those without her particular gift. "We are getting closer," Nora murmured after several hours of careful travel. I can feel the disturbance growing stronger. Whatever holds the bloodstone is not far now. As if in response to her words, the forest around them grew suddenly quiet, the usual sounds of rustling leaves and distant birdsong fading into an unsettling silence. The three creatures accompanying them grew visibly tense, their earlier calm replaced by alert wariness. "Something is wrong," Owen said quietly, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. Nora's expression grew troubled, her senses picking up something far larger and more dangerous than anything they had encountered thus far. "There is something ahead," she said carefully, "something much stronger than the creatures we calmed before." They continued forward cautiously, finally reaching the edge of a hidden clearing, exactly as the calmed creatures had described. At its center stood an ancient stone pedestal, clearly meant to hold something precious, now standing empty and cracked, dark energy seeming to pulse faintly from its damaged surface. But it was not the empty pedestal that immediately captured their attention. Surrounding the clearing, emerging slowly from the shadows between ancient trees, stood a pack of creatures, far larger and more numerous than the three they had previously encountered. At least a dozen massive, shadowy forms circled the clearing, their glowing amber eyes filled with far greater aggression and confusion than anything Nora had sensed before. "There are so many," Owen whispered, his voice tight with alarm. At the center of the gathered creatures stood a figure unlike anything they had expected. A tall man, cloaked in dark robes, stood calmly beside the empty pedestal, an ornate, glowing stone clutched firmly within his grasp. His expression carried cold calculation rather than fear, clearly unsurprised by their arrival. "I wondered when you would finally arrive," the stranger said, his voice carrying an unsettling calm across the tense clearing. "The famous beast whisperer of Ashwood Hollow, come to reclaim what does not belong to her." "Who are you?" Ethan demanded, stepping protectively in front of Nora, despite her earlier insistence on facing danger directly. "My name is of little importance," the stranger replied smoothly. "What matters is the power contained within this bloodstone, power I intend to fully understand and control, regardless of the disturbance it currently causes among your precious forest creatures." "You are causing chaos throughout this entire region," Nora said firmly, stepping forward despite Ethan's protective stance. "Countless creatures suffer because of your selfish actions." "A small price," the stranger replied dismissively, "for the immense power this artifact promises." He raised the glowing bloodstone higher, and immediately, the surrounding creatures grew visibly more agitated, their restless energy spiking sharply, aggression replacing their earlier confusion entirely. Nora felt the shift immediately, alarm coloring her expression. "He is deliberately provoking them," she said urgently, using the bloodstone's power to incite their aggression. "Precisely," the stranger confirmed, a thin smile crossing his features. "And now, let us see if your remarkable gift proves strong enough to calm an entire pack of creatures deliberately turned against you." Without further warning, he lowered the bloodstone slightly, and the surrounding creatures surged forward simultaneously, their earlier hesitation replaced entirely by artificially induced aggression. Warriors scrambled immediately into defensive positions, weapons raised, though the sheer number of advancing creatures made their earlier struggle against only three seem insignificant by comparison. "Nora, get back!" Ethan shouted, moving to shield her from the advancing threat. But Nora remained firmly in place, her expression calm, despite the chaos erupting around her. She could feel the artificial aggression clearly now, forced upon the creatures rather than genuine, layered thinly over their natural confusion and fear. "This is not their true nature," she said firmly, more to herself than anyone else. "I can still reach them." She closed her sightless eyes, extending her senses fully outward, reaching past the artificial aggression forced upon the creatures, searching instead for the genuine fear and confusion buried beneath. It was more difficult than anything she had attempted before, the bloodstone's dark influence actively working against her efforts. "Nora!" Ethan called urgently, watching helplessly as the creatures drew closer, their massive forms moving with terrifying speed toward their position. "I need a moment longer," she said, her voice strained with concentration, sweat beading along her forehead despite the cool forest air. The stranger laughed coldly, clearly amused by her efforts. "You cannot possibly overcome the bloodstone's influence. Its power far exceeds whatever connection you believe you possess." But Nora refused to relent, pushing deeper into her connection with the approaching creatures, searching desperately for the genuine fear and confusion she knew remained buried beneath the artificial aggression currently controlling them. She could feel it clearly now, faint but unmistakable, a natural desire for safety and calm, hidden beneath the forced chaos. "You are not truly angry," she whispered urgently, her voice carrying strangely across the clearing despite its quiet volume. "You are afraid, and I can help you." The creature's advance faltered slightly, their glowing eyes flickering with sudden confusion, caught between the artificial aggression forced upon them and the genuine calm Nora offered instead. The stranger's confident expression wavered for the first time, clearly unprepared for her unexpected resistance against the Bloodstone's influence. "Impossible," he muttered, raising the Bloodstone higher, attempting to reinforce his control over the faltering creatures. But it was too late. Nora's connection had already taken hold, offering the creatures a genuine alternative to the artificial aggression forced upon them, and one by one, they began slowing their advance, their glowing eyes settling into confused stillness rather than continued aggression. The stranger stared in disbelief as his carefully orchestrated attack began unraveling before his eyes. The creatures he had manipulated so easily, now resisting his control entirely, drawn instead toward the quiet, steady presence of the woman he had so confidently underestimated. "This is far from over," he snarled, clutching the Bloodstone tightly, his composed demeanor finally cracking under the weight of unexpected failure. Nora, exhausted but unyielding, opened her sightless eyes once more, her expression calm, despite the immense effort required to reach this point. "It ends now," she said firmly, "whether you accept it willingly or not." The clearing fell into tense stillness, the dozen massive creatures now standing motionless, between aggression and calm, their glowing eyes flickering uncertainly, as they struggled against the conflicting forces pulling at their instincts. The stranger's composure had cracked visibly, his earlier confidence replaced by mounting desperation, as he realized his carefully orchestrated plan was rapidly unraveling. "You cannot possibly maintain this," he snapped, raising the Bloodstone higher still, pouring more of its dark energy into reinforcing his control over the wavering creatures. "My connection to this artifact is absolute." "Your connection is built on force," Nora replied steadily, her voice carrying quiet determination despite the exhaustion evident in her expression. "Mine is built on trust. Force may overpower for a moment, but trust endures far longer." Ethan watched anxiously beside her, torn between his desire to intervene and his understanding that any sudden movement might shatter the delicate balance Nora had managed to establish. Owen and the remaining warriors held their positions carefully, weapons ready, yet trusting Nora's guidance completely. The stranger, sensing his control slipping further, made a desperate decision. With a sharp, guttural command, he directed the full force of the Bloodstone's power toward the largest creature among the group, attempting to turn it directly against Nora herself. The massive beast lurched forward suddenly, its glowing eyes flashing with renewed, artificially forced aggression, closing the distance toward Nora with terrifying speed. Ethan moved instinctively, positioning himself between Nora and the charging creature, prepared to intervene at any cost. "Wait," Nora called urgently, her voice carrying unexpected authority despite the danger rapidly approaching. Ethan hesitated, torn between his instinct to protect her and his trust in her judgment. The creature closed the remaining distance in mere seconds, its massive form looming directly above them. Yet at the final moment, Nora extended her hand firmly, her expression fierce with concentration. "Stop," she commanded, her voice resonating with a strange, powerful clarity that seemed to vibrate through the very air surrounding them. The creature skidded to an abrupt halt mere inches from where Ethan stood protectively, its massive form trembling with the conflicting forces still warring within its mind. Its glowing eyes locked directly onto Nora, confusion and desperate pleading evident despite its earlier forced aggression. "I know this is not truly you," Nora said gently, her voice softening despite the tension of the moment. "Fight against what he is forcing upon you. You are stronger than his control." The creature let out a pained, guttural sound, clearly struggling internally against the artificial aggression still pulsing through its mind. Slowly, painfully, it began retreating backward, shaking its massive head, as though attempting to physically dislodge the dark influence controlling it. The stranger's expression twisted with fury and disbelief. "This should not be possible," he snarled, clutching the Bloodstone tightly enough that his knuckles turned white beneath his dark robes. Your power depends entirely on force and fear, Nora said, straightening confidently, despite her obvious exhaustion. But genuine connection cannot be manufactured through domination. It must be earned through trust, patience, and understanding, qualities you clearly lack. Enraged by his failing control, the stranger made one final, desperate attempt, channeling the Bloodstone's remaining power into a single, concentrated burst, aimed directly at forcing every remaining creature into simultaneous, uncontrolled aggression. The clearing shuddered with the sudden surge of dark energy, and for a brief, terrifying moment, it appeared his desperate gambit might succeed. But Nora, drawing upon every ounce of strength and connection she possessed, closed her eyes once more, reaching outward with a clarity and intensity she had never before attempted. She spoke not with words this time, but with pure, unfiltered intention, offering every creature within the clearing an undeniable alternative to the chaos being forced upon them. The forest itself seemed to respond to her call. Birds that had fled earlier returned suddenly, their calls echoing strangely through the tense clearing. Smaller creatures emerged cautiously from hiding, gathering at the edges of the confrontation, as though drawn by an invisible, powerful summons. The very air seemed to hum with quiet, resonant energy. One by one, the massive creatures began turning away from the stranger entirely, his artificial control finally shattering completely beneath the weight of Nora's genuine, overwhelming connection. They gathered instead around her, their earlier aggression replaced entirely by calm, protective loyalty. The stranger stumbled backward, his expression finally shifting from fury into genuine fear, as he realized the full scope of what he now faced. The dozen massive creatures, along with countless smaller animals gathered at the clearing's edge, all stood united, calm, yet clearly ready to act, should Nora require their protection. "This is impossible," he whispered, backing further away, the Bloodstone trembling within his grasp. "Return what you have stolen," Nora said firmly, stepping forward despite her obvious exhaustion, "and this can end peacefully." The stranger's eyes darted desperately toward the empty pedestal, then toward the surrounding creatures now standing protectively around Nora, clearly outmatched and outnumbered. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered the Bloodstone, his earlier arrogance completely replaced by defeated resignation. "You do not understand the power you have just denied yourself," he muttered bitterly, though his tone carried clear acceptance of his failure. "I understand exactly what true power means," Nora replied calmly. "It is not domination or control. It is connection, trust, and the willingness to protect rather than exploit." Ethan moved forward carefully, taking the Bloodstone gently from the stranger's trembling hands, while Owen and the remaining warriors secured him, ensuring he posed no further threat. The moment the artifact left his possession, the surrounding forest seemed to release a collective, palpable sigh of relief, the oppressive, restless energy that had plagued the Thornwood for weeks, finally beginning to dissipate. Nora, her strength finally giving way to complete exhaustion, allowed herself to lean gratefully against Ethan's steady support, the weight of everything she had just accomplished settling heavily upon her. "You did it," Ethan whispered softly, pride and relief evident in every word. "You truly did it." "We did it," Nora corrected gently, gesturing toward the creatures still gathered protectively around them, "all of us, together." As the stranger was led away in restrained silence, and the ancient Bloodstone was carefully returned to its rightful place upon the restored pedestal, the entire clearing seemed to shift, the dark, restless energy finally replaced by calm, peaceful stillness. The creatures who had gathered slowly began dispersing back into the depths of the forest, their earlier confusion and aggression completely resolved. Nora stood quietly amid the gradually emptying clearing, her sightless eyes reflecting quiet satisfaction despite her obvious exhaustion. She had proven, beyond any remaining doubt, that the strength others had so wrongly dismissed within her was far greater than any of them could have possibly imagined. The true test had finally been overcome, but the journey home, and the recognition awaiting her within Ashwood Hollow, still remained ahead. The journey back to Ashwood Hollow felt different from the tense, cautious expedition that had carried them into the depths of the Thornwood only hours earlier. The forest itself seemed lighter somehow, the oppressive, restless energy that had plagued its ancient trees, finally replaced by calm, peaceful stillness. Birdsong returned gradually, echoing softly through branches that no longer seemed to loom threateningly overhead. Nora walked slowly, leaning gratefully on Ethan's steady support, her exhaustion evident in every careful step, yet her expression remained peaceful, quietly satisfied despite the immense effort the confrontation had demanded of her. The three creatures who had first tested her remarkable gift walked alongside them protectively, their earlier aggression replaced entirely by loyal companionship. "You should rest," Ethan said gently, noticing the visible toll the day's events had taken upon her. "I will," Nora replied softly, "once we return home." Word of their success had already begun spreading ahead of them, carried swiftly by warriors who had rushed forward to inform the waiting village. By the time they finally emerged from the tree line surrounding Ashwood Hollow, an enormous crowd had gathered, every villager eager to witness their return and learn firsthand what had transpired within the depths of the Thornwood. Margaret Doyle stood at the front of the gathered crowd, her weathered face reflecting quiet pride and vindication, as Nora and Ethan approached slowly, the creatures walking calmly beside them. "You have done what none of us believed possible," Margaret said warmly, stepping forward to greet them. "We accomplished it together," Nora replied, echoing the same sentiment she had shared earlier with Ethan. "This pack's strength lies not in doubting what we do not understand, but in trusting what proves itself worthy, regardless of appearances." The crowd murmured in agreement, many faces reflecting genuine admiration and respect that had been noticeably absent only weeks earlier. Even Derek, standing near the edge of the gathered villagers, appeared visibly humbled, his earlier hostility completely replaced by quiet acknowledgement of what he had witnessed. Slowly, he stepped forward, addressing Nora directly, for the first time since their confrontation in the Great Hall weeks earlier. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice carrying genuine sincerity rather than his usual arrogance. "I judged you unfairly, based entirely on assumptions I never bothered to question. You have proven, beyond any doubt, that true strength cannot be measured by physical sight alone." Nora offered a warm, genuine smile in response. "Apology accepted, Derek. Doubt is a natural response to the unfamiliar, though I hope you will remember this lesson whenever you encounter something you do not yet understand." Derek nodded solemnly, retreating quietly into the crowd, his earlier animosity finally replaced by genuine respect. Vivian Marsh, standing nearby, offered Nora a warm, approving smile, her own earlier doubts having already been resolved through their previous conversation. Colin Marsh stepped forward as well, addressing Ethan directly. "I believe the strength of your pack has been proven beyond question," he said. "Perhaps it is time we discuss a genuine alliance, built on mutual respect rather than unnecessary conditions." Ethan nodded gratefully. "I would welcome that." As celebrations began throughout Ashwood Hollow that evening, marking both the resolution of the recent threat and the remarkable strength Nora had displayed, she found herself surrounded by villagers eager to express their gratitude and admiration, a stark contrast to the whispered doubts and quiet dismissals she had endured for so long. Ivy Turner, the young girl who had first witnessed Nora's extraordinary gift with the injured hawk, rushed forward eagerly, wrapping her arms tightly around Nora's waist. "I always knew you were special," Ivy said proudly, beaming up at her. Nora laughed softly, gently returning the embrace. "You were the first to truly see it, Ivy, even before I fully understood it myself." Later that evening, as the celebrations continued joyfully around them, Ethan led Nora quietly toward the edge of the hollow, away from the noise and excitement, toward the peaceful garden, where they had shared so many quiet conversations throughout the recent turmoil. "I have never been prouder of anyone in my entire life," Ethan said softly, taking her hands gently in his own. "You never doubted me," Nora replied warmly. "Not once, even when everyone else did." "I could never doubt you," Ethan said. "I saw your strength long before anyone else recognized it. I simply feel grateful the rest of the pack finally sees it too." Nora smiled softly, resting her head gently against his shoulder. "Perhaps this entire experience has taught this pack something valuable, beyond simply resolving the threat we faced. Perhaps it has taught them that true strength often comes disguised in ways we do not immediately recognize or understand." "A lesson I hope they never forget," Ethan agreed. As months passed following the resolution of the crisis, Ashwood Hollow flourished under a renewed sense of unity and trust. Nora's remarkable gift became widely celebrated rather than feared, her guidance sought regularly whenever the pack faced uncertainty involving the wild creatures surrounding their territory. The bond between the alliance with Colin Marsh's pack strengthened considerably, built now upon genuine respect rather than the political convenience once suggested. Derek, humbled by his earlier misjudgment, became one of Nora's most vocal supporters, often assisting warriors in learning to better understand and respect the boundaries of the Thornwood's wild inhabitants. Vivian Marsh, meanwhile, became a genuine friend to both Nora and Ethan, her earlier ambitions replaced by authentic camaraderie. The three creatures who had once tested Nora's strength remained close to Ashwood Hollow permanently, no longer wild, unpredictable threats, but protective guardians who patrolled the borders alongside the pack's own warriors, a living symbol of the trust and understanding Nora had established. One quiet evening, nearly a year after the confrontation within the Thornwood, Ethan and Nora stood together once more within their peaceful garden, watching as the sun set gently behind the horizon, though only Ethan could witness the vibrant colors painting the sky. "Describe it to me," Nora said softly, as she often did during moments like these. Ethan smiled warmly, gently describing the brilliant oranges and soft purples stretching across the evening sky, the way golden light filtered gently through distant clouds. Nora listened intently, her expression peaceful, feeling the warmth of the setting sun against her skin, content in the quiet beauty of the moment, despite her inability to witness it visually. "It sounds beautiful," she murmured. "Almost as beautiful as you," Ethan replied gently, earning a soft, genuine laugh from her in response. As they stood together, peacefully content within the life they had built, Nora reflected quietly on everything that had transpired over the past year. She had once been dismissed as fragile, weak, incapable of contributing meaningfully to the pack she loved so deeply. Yet through patience, courage, and an unwavering belief in herself, she had proven, beyond any remaining doubt, that true strength often lies hidden beneath assumptions others carelessly make. Ashwood Hollow had learned, through her example, that weakness and strength are rarely defined by physical appearances or obvious abilities alone. Sometimes, the greatest strength lies quietly within those most easily underestimated, waiting patiently for the right moment to reveal itself completely. And within the peaceful stillness of that evening garden, surrounded by the life and love she had fought so hard to protect, Nora Bennett finally understood completely that she had never truly been blind at all. She had simply always seen the world and its true strength in a way no one else around her had ever fully understood.